friends, it's Becky, and today I'm going to show you how to make these little sand dollar guys. I am using some beads from the 2-hole bead subscription from Beads to Live By for these, and these were from the April 2-hole bead subscription. We have some Ginkos, some Czech glass 2-hole bar beads, and these mini chevron beads. Are a little bit smaller than Eva beads usually are. We've got all of those, and you want 5 of each of these for one of these components. I'm also using some beads from the seed bead subscription from Beads to Live By. These are their curated collection, so they're curated to go together. I'm going to be using some 15-0 seed beads and some 8-0 seed beads, not an 11-0 in sight for this. And since I also got some Czech glass fire polish beads in the add-on bundle, I'm going to be using some of these as well. These are 3mm fire polish beads. And so we're going to be making these little guys using these beads. We're going to put them all together. In this video, I've already made 2 components, but I'm going to make another one with y'all, and then I'm going to turn 2 of them into earrings and 1 of them into a necklace. And so for the necklace part, which will be after we make the component, I'm also going to be using a few more beads from that Czech glass add-on bundle. I am using some 8-pound fire line, and I thought I was using 6-pound fire line until just now when I was setting up for this. But as you can see, the 8-pound fire line works just fine for these. So I'm using about a little more than an arm's length. I'd say if you hold one end in your hand and the other end of your spool in your other hand and put that one to like your left shoulder and then extend your right arm out, that's about a little more than an arm's length, and that's going to be sufficient for this activity. Let's zoom in a little bit so you can see what I'm doing better. And the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to pick up all 5, if you've got your needle threaded, I'm going to pick up all 5 of these bar beads at once. And now something that I sometimes forget to do is just verify before I start working with a bead that both holes in a 2-hole bead are clear. And I've started doing this thing where, because I always forget before I start, I just do a little poke in the other hole before I pick it up in the hole that I intended to pick it up in. And it's just something that I started doing so that I don't get partway into a project and realize that I have to undo it because one of the holes in my 2-hole beads is blocked. So these are those bar beads, and we're just going to scooch these down almost to the end of our string. We're going to want to leave enough that we can tie a knot with. So that should be about maybe 3 or 4 inches. And then you want to tie like a square knot or a surgeon's knot, just something that's going to hold it in place while we're working with it. And that's just going to make a little circle. I'm going to hold this out of the way while I work on it because I will be tying it off after I'm finished with the rest of it. And right here where I've got my knot, I'm going to go ahead and go into the next bar bead right there in that same hole that the thread is already coming through, just to move over one and get ready to start adding our other beads. And to do that, I'm going to step up from this inner hole to the outer hole in this circle. And now that I'm coming out of there, I am going to be picking up the Ginkos and the chevrons. And for the Ginkos, because they're not like a right or left, it doesn't matter which hole you go through. It just matters which direction you're going in the hole. They've got the inner curve and then our outer curve. For this project, we're going to be going into the inner curve hole. And then for the Eva beads, or the little mini chevrons, you've got your outer chevron and you've got your inner chevron. So we're going to be going into one of the holes on the inner chevron. And again, I'm just double checking that both holes are good before I put it on my needle. And for this part, you can add those other beads before you go back through here, or you don't have to put this right next to these before you pick up your other beads and put it through here. But I find it easier for me to go ahead and have these beads where I want them to be before I do this next step. So that's why I moved them down to be right here next to it. So we're coming out of the top of the ginkgo and the top of this chevron so that the point is facing away from the center of this. And I'm going to pick up one 15-0 seed bead, one 8-0 seed bead, and one 15-0 seed bead, just like that. And then I'm going to go back down through the other hole of both the chevron and the ginkgo. And most of the time these will just pop right into place. If they don't, feel free to adjust them with your needle. And then I'm going to go into the next bar bead in this circle. So I'm coming out of the inner curve hole on this ginkgo. I'm going to go right into this bar bead next to it. And that's our first little petal or leaf, or however we want to look at it. I haven't decided if it's a sand dollar or maybe a star flower. I haven't decided. Kind of looks sand dollar-y to me, so that may be what I end up calling it. We'll figure it out by the time we get to the end of this. All right, so the next one, I'm going to do the exact same thing. I'm going to go into the inner hole on a ginkgo, go into the inner hole on the chevron, move them down next to my work where I want them to be, and then pick up my 15-0, my 8-0, and my 15-0, and go back down through the other hole of both the chevron and the ginkgo. And if you angle it right, you can even go through the bar bead without having to take another step. You don't have to try and angle it though. You can do that in multiple steps if you want to. All right, and I'm just going to continue on and add the rest of these. There's only 5 repeats of this, so it should go pretty quick when you do this. And I'm just going to keep this rolling while I add them. Because it might actually take more time to stop it, finish it, and then film it than it would save for you to do this. But yeah, I don't know if you guys ever have this happen to you where you're in the middle of figuring out another problem, or you're thinking of a different design and suddenly something just pops into your head, it clicks into place, so you have to stop what you're doing and do that. Well, that's what happened with this. I was in the middle of doing a totally different project and this just clicked right into place in my head, and I was like, well, I gotta go do that. And I'm not mad about that because I really quite love it. But yeah, it was unexpected that was gonna happen. Sometimes I have like several different things kind of percolating, working out, ticking away in the back of my brain while I'm in the middle of doing other things, and this was one of them. And it's actually working out really nicely. One of the things I like about bead weaving is just the fact that it is basically like solving a puzzle. It's figuring out how things work together. It challenges my brain that way, and I really, really enjoy it. All right, so here we are at the last one. I'm gonna go ahead and do my 15-0s, my 8-0s, and my 15-0s. Whoop. I'm gonna pop back down through here. and go through that same bar bead that we started with at the beginning of it. Now I'm going to set this down real quick. Just put my finger on the top of it and give this a little bit of a tug just to tighten these up. We will be tightening these up as we go, as we add more things to it. But it's a little loosey-goosey right now, and that's totally fine. That's totally exactly the way it probably should be. Remember, when you're tightening up your string, to pull on the string at the thread and not on the needle. Just give that a little tug. That's all we're doing. All right, now the next part is one of the ways that is going to tighten this up and make it less wobbly. And that is, we're going to be filling in some of the space in here on the sides, and we're going to do that mostly with these 11-0 or these 8-0 seed beads, but we're also going to be using some of these 3mm fire polish beads. We're going to start with the 8-0s though. I'm going to pick up 2 8-0 seed beads, and I'm coming just right out of this hole in this bar bead, this top hole here. And I'm going to skip the Ginkgo and sew directly up into this chevron bead right there like that. We're going to be going through just these top bits without going through the Ginkgo. And it's totally fine if this one lays flat like that. That's what we want actually. And if this one stays kind of with an L shape between the bottom of this bead and the top of that bead, because you're going to see it's going to work out just fine for us to have them sitting there like that with that gap. So now I'm going to sew through the 15-0, the 8-0 at the top, and the 15-0, and then back through the other side of that chevron, just the chevron, not the Ginkgo. And now that I'm coming out of this Ginkgo right here, I'm going to pick up another 2 8-0 seed beads. I'm going to sew in this direction through that top hole in that bar bead down there. Sorry for hitting the camera there. So now I've got these 2 on this side. Coming out of this other hole, I went into this hole on the bar bead and I came out of this side of the hole. I'm going to sew up through this 8-0 that's closest to the bar bead. Like that. And that kind of centers it now over that bar bead. I'm going to pick up another 8-0 and sew up into this chevron. Make sure that doesn't catch on anything. Just reminded me to clear things away from my thing. So there we go. We've got these 3 8-0s in here. I'm going to do the same thing all the way around here. I'm going to follow the thread path up through the 15-0, the 8-0, and the 15-0, and then down through that chevron. I'm going to add 2 8-0s, go through the bar bead, go up through that 1 8-0 that's right above it, add 1 more 8-0, and then go up into that chevron. I'm going to continue this all the way around until I get around to the other side. Let's see, I have 1, 2 more to do, so stick with me. We'll do those together. Just go all the way through. Just adding those 3 8-0s between each of these petals. And we're centering that 1 8-0, that middle one. and then adding that top one before we move on to the next section. That thread just got caught on something, so pull that out. This is what happens when I'm trying to go a little more quickly. Back up through there. And one more. All right, so we are back just about to where we started with these two, and you see that they're kind of pulled over this way. It's because we haven't centered that center bead. We don't have it attached to this other side either. So after I go through these last 15-0, 8-0, 15-0, and chevrons, I am going to need to finish up what we started with this one by grabbing one 8-0, sewing into that 8-0 that is right there, supposed to be in the center, and then into the side of that bar bead. All right, so now I'm going to be going through the bar beads and the Ginkos, and then these 8-0s to add my 3mm fire polish beads. So I'm coming out of this side of this bar bead. I'm going to sew into the Ginkgo, but not the chevron. So I'm coming out there. And then I'm going to back this up and just go sew right into that 8-0 that's next to the chevron that I'm coming out of, or the Ginkgo that I'm coming out of. So now that I'm right here on there, I'm going to pop a 3mm fire polish bead onto my needle. So into this 8-0 that's across the way from it, so that that sits there. I'm going to sew down into this Ginkgo, like that. And I want to get my thread over here to this side. So to do that, I'm going to be reinforcing all of these thread paths by going through this top hole of this Ginkgo that's next to it, down into the second hole of that same Ginkgo, or sorry, the bar bead, not the Ginkgo. Whew. Into this inner hole on the next bar bead, and then through the second hole of that bar bead, up through the Ginkgo that it is right next to, and now I am ready to go through this 8-0 and add another fire polish bead. So all this is doing is moving the thread along, but also reinforcing this work so that it's not as wibbly wobbly over here. This is a little bit firmer. So I'm going to go back down through this Ginkgo and do the same thing where I'm going through the Ginkgo, that outer hole on this bar bead, the inner hole on this bar bead. I'm actually going to stop right here before I continue on, and I'm going to add a 3mm fire polish bead here in the center. So I'm coming out of this bar bead here. I'm going to count 1, 2 bar beads across from there. And I'm going to pick up a fire polish bead and that bar bead that's across from there. I'm going to go through the right side and out of the left. Oop. That's just popped right into place. So I'm coming out of the left side of this. I'm going to sew through this 3mm fire polish bead. Like that. See, I was coming out of this bar bead initially, so I'm going to sew into this bar bead now. And that's moved my thread, so I'm in position to continue on doing the same thing that I did on this side, where I go up through the top hole of that bar bead, through the ginkgo, through the 8/0, and then add another 3mm fire polish bead and go through that next 8/0. All right, I've got 2 more 8/0 or fire polish beads to add, so let's go back through this ginkgo. You don't have to do this here. You can add that at any of these points along the way. It's going to be just fine. You could do it at the end after you've added all of the fire polish beads around there. I just thought it was a convenient place for us to pop that into place. And if you wanted to, you could use different colors of fire polish beads between the inside and the outside. You could even replace some of these outer 8/0s with some fire polish beads if you wanted. You'd have to be sure that you weren't going to be using a jump ring as your connector, which we'll get to in a minute if you were to do that. All right. Second to the last one. We just have one more that we need to place after this. So let's move our thread over till we can get to there. Go. You can't angle that the right way to go up through there on the same pass, which is fine. There we go. All right, so here we're going to make a decision because it is just about done. We just need to attach a bail or a jump ring. So here, if you're going to be using a jump ring, which I will show you how to on this one, you would go ahead and sew back down to where your threads meet, tie a knot, and then burn off your ends. But if you're going to be using either a wire guardian, or I went ahead and just made a loop with the 15/0s for this one, then you're going to want to do this instead. So instead of going down into the ginkgo at the end of this, I'm going to go up through this chevron and up through that 15/0. All right. Now, if you're using a wire guardian, I'd go ahead and add 2 15/0s, go through one leg of the wire guardian, add 2 more 15/0s, and then sew down around. But if you're going to be using these, I'd grab 10 15-0s. I pick them all up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So I've got my 10 15-0s coming out of this 15-0 here. I'm going to skip the 8-0 altogether and sew down into that 15-0 on the other side. And the chevron, if I can maneuver it. That makes a little loop right there. I'm going to reinforce this by going from this hole of the chevron directly over to the next hole of the chevron, the same one, and up through those 15-0s. I'm going to want to go through all of them. You can go through them in stages because nobody's needle can bend like that. This will just reinforce this loop. There we go. And now you can go back down through your work so that the ends of your threads meet and you can tie it off. And then you're basically done, right? Let me get to a point where I can actually finish this. Just following thread paths through the work. Heading back over to where that end of my thread was. It's right there. So I'm gonna just pop it over here and then I can tie another knot, cut it, and burn off my ends. This is awkward. All right, there we go. So these two are going to be earrings, and all I have to do for these to be earrings is put a ear wire through that loop, that I just made with the 15-0s. And I don't think there's a right side or a wrong side to this. Doesn't feel like there is. But my other one that I made earlier, I'm going to show you an alternate way of putting on a bail or attachment besides this making a loop method. So with this one, there is enough room in this hole here on these 8-0 seed beads that I can take a jump ring. Let me grab one real quick. actually might need 2 of them if I want this to work correctly as a pendant. But I can open up this jump ring. Slide it through that 6/0 seed bead, or sorry, 8/0 seed bead. Actually, I think I need a smaller jump ring. That one is too thick. There we go. I knew there was something funky about the jump rings. Couldn't remember. See, these smaller jump rings have a thinner gauge, so they work better in here. And I am going to use the larger jump ring through this smaller one so that it hangs right as a pendant. All right, so that's how you do the bead weaving portion. I'm going to go ahead and make a necklace now using some of these check glass beads, some of the 8/0s. I don't think I'm going to need to use these 15/0s anymore. And I may actually use some of these as well. But let me grab some beading wire. I think some of this purple amethyst beading wire would look nice with this. Yep. All right. And I'm just going to make this up as I go, guys. Gonna do half on that side, half on this side. Gonna take half of these ish so that I have enough for everyone. Get some of these green guys. And I'm just going to pick up, let's see, 3 of the 8/0s. A pink bead. A green bead. A pink bead. And 3 of the 8/0s. And 1 of these same purpley fire polish beads that we had before. 1, 2, 3. Pink, green, pink. It's like I know there's a hole because it was strung on it when I got to it. There we go. 1, 2, 3. All right, so I'm just going to go ahead and repeat this for my necklace until I get to about half the length that I want. And then I'll string on my pendant, and then I'll repeat it for the other side. And I will meet you back here at the end so that I can finish up my necklace. All right, friends, so here we are. I went ahead and just repeated that beading pattern until I got to about the length that I wanted. I stopped at the part in the pattern where we had these larger green beads because these other beads are so small that this jump ring just would have slid right over them, and then it might not have been in the middle anymore and all that stuff. So then I could just repeat the pattern going back the other direction, and I went ahead and attached a jump ring to this end of my cord and my cable because you can use any closures that you like when you're doing a necklace like this, and I've just chosen to use a lobster clasp and jump ring for this. So I closed the first one up, and I'll just show you with this one how I did it because it's the exact same way. I put on a 2x2 crimp tube because I like using 2x2 crimp tubes and my magical crimper. You could use any crimp that you wanted. And then I put that on my wire, and then I put my wire through the part of my closure. This one is the lobster clasp. On this one, I put it through the jump ring, then it back on itself, back through the crimp, like this. Go. And I want to tighten up my wire and my crimp, but I don't want it too tight because I'd like there to still be some movement in this wire. So I'm just going to bend it before I crimp it. That way I can tighten it up here while it's bent. Then when I straighten it out, there'll be some room. All right, so I'm just going to use my magical crimper and squish this crimp flat when it's centered in the middle of that. Then rotate it and squish it from a different direction, and rotate it and squish, and rotate it and squish. And just keep going around until it's smoothed out all of the edges and the crimp is a nice round ball. There we go. And now I have my necklace, and I think I'm gonna call it Starflower. I know it's very sand dollary, but I think I like it like that. And I did go ahead and swap out my ear wires on these just so that they would go a little bit better with these. All right. If you want to check out my unboxing and see what other beads came in the Curated Collection subscription, I'll link my unboxing video in the description below. I'll also put a link in the description to Beads to Live By. You can check out their curated collections. All of these beads are available individually for purchase outside of the subscription as well, if you wanted to just pick up a couple of them and make yourself some of these. Anyway, I hope y'all enjoyed this. I hope you learned something, and have a great, wonderful weekend and happy beading.